Um, Somebody else had also asked if there was any of me in the story. And I have to say, I think this is actually the first book I've written where my personality is not really in there very much. In my first two books, Worlds Collide, well, the first character, the main character in Worlds Collide, was basically me in terms of her personality and the way that she acted, that sort of thing, to the point where I had friends asking me if I had been if the reason I had moved to California was because I'd been in an abusive relationship. It turns out that the main character was in a relationship that was beginning to get abusive, and that's part of why she ends up leaving and moving from Chicago to California, which I had just done, moved from Chicago to California, and it was in California that I got the idea for Worlds Collide. So yeah, that, I mean, she was very much me in that book. And then in Violet Between, that main character, I think she had a lot of characteristics that I wished I had. So she was kind of the me that I sometimes wish I am. She was very artistic. I love art. In my head, I'm a fantastic artist, but when I actually try to do anything, not so much. So I think I kind of made her who I sometimes wished I could be. And then really with this book though, I'm not so much in this one, which I actually am proud of, because it's really hard to not write yourself. It's because it's easy to write what you know, and when you're writing somebody's reactions or somebody's personality or how they react to stress and all those kind of things, obviously the first place you tend to go is, how do I react to stress? How do I respond in these kind of situations? And it's really easy to just jot those into the story, and eventually though all of your characters look like you, which is not that interesting. So I'm actually kind of proud of the fact that I managed to break away from that and to make people who were more unique and were not so much based on me. A couple people had asked questions about, sorry, I've got my notes down here, about, oh, if I would ever write a prequel that would talk about Rick and Kim and kind of what led up to them becoming the people that they were in this book. And then somebody had also asked what happened after the story with Joshua's situation with his in-laws, if that improved, if the story had continued, would we see that their relationship had improved or deteriorated even more, or what? Totally interesting questions. No one has ever asked me that kind of thing before. And it's really interesting because I've been trying to think of more things that I could put on my website for readers to download or to come read about. And the idea of a prequel, totally something that I could write and stick up there, almost like the lost chapters or something. So I hadn't really thought about doing a whole book, but I may very well, thank you for the idea, whoever it was that asked that question. You'll have to tell me your name so I can credit you somewhere. But I think I might actually do that, write a little prequel that shows how Kim's upbringing and Rick's upbringing led them to be the people that they were in the story. That's really interesting. And then with Joshua, maybe I'll have to write a postscript as well. I can write what happened at the end of the story, what happened later. I think off the top of my head, I kind of had the impression that things were not going to improve with Joshua and his in-laws, unfortunately. I think they're in for a rocky road. And perhaps I'll write that when I find some time and put that up on the website. You guys can tell me what you think of my outcomes. Let's see, what other questions? Somebody had asked, the idea, where I got Joshua's name. Picking names is really hard for me. I tend to go to the same first letter. Like, I always go to D's and G's and R's first. I don't know why. But when I was picking the names, I really, Joshua is somebody that I think I'd really like. If he was a real person, I'd really like him. I wanted to give him a name that I really liked. And I've always liked the name Joshua. It sounds strong and masculine, but kind of a little soft also. It's not like it's not like Rick, which I wanted to give Rick a name that sounded sharp, and I think Rick was a good name for him. But I wanted Joshua to have a name that was strong but also a little soft, and I think Joshua kind of conveys that. But then also, and I wish I had looked up this information before I turned on the video camera, but I think the name Joshua is actually a more literal translation of what Jesus' name actually was in Hebrew or Aramaic or something like that. Don't quote me on any of this. I'll have to look it up. But that idea of kind of naming him after Jesus, because he eventually is the one that, in a way, saves Kim. I wanted to give him a name that kind of reflected that as well. So, so there you go. That's where Joshua's name came from. Let's see. Answer that. Oh, what happened to Rick? Somebody else wanted to know what had happened to Rick. Oh, I think this was the question from before. What had happened to Rick to make him who he was? I think that was what the question was. All I wrote down was what happened to Rick. Now I don't remember what you were. Oh yeah, that's right. You were asking, whoever you are, you were asking because it seemed like obviously he's evil, but he's also a victim. And so what had happened to him? I'll have to do that whole prequel thing. You really got me thinking about this. Let's see. Oh, had I considered a different outcome in the scene where Rick was shaking Anne? That was really kind of scary to write. I had a really hard time once Anne was introduced into the story. Being a mom, it's really, really hard for me to write the scenes where Anne and Rick were in the same room at the same time, because I was always worried about what he might do to her. Which I know sounds a little weird, since I'm the one writing the scenes. I should know what's going to happen, and I did know what was going to happen. But when I was plotting out the scenes at first, you have to think of what all of your options are. You've got these people in this setting, and here's the catalyst. What are all the various things that could happen, and which one am I going to pick? And so obviously, sometimes the possibilities were that Anne was going to get abused, and that was really, I had a really hard time considering that. I've become a lot more sensitive to children experiencing violence since I became a mom. It's really, really difficult for me to deal with. There have been some books lately that I haven't even been able to finish reading because of things that are happening to children in them. Even though I know that they're really good books, everyone raves about them, I just can't go there. So I needed something to happen to Anne that would be severe enough that it would finally get Kim into gear for finally realizing she needed to leave, and being willing to leave when she ran into Joshua, and he was ready to take her out. So I knew something had to happen. I didn't want it to be horrible. I didn't want her to end up in the hospital. I didn't want anything to happen that would involve Child Protective Services, because that was a whole other angle I didn't want to have to involve. So I knew it had to be something severe, but not something really horrible. So so I guess the very roundabout answer is to say that yes, I did think of other outcomes, but that seemed to be the one that was that struck the right balance. Anne wasn't coming away with shaken baby syndrome because Kim gets to her in time, but it was bad enough that Kim realized my child doesn't deserve this. She's getting what I deserve. She has nothing to do with this. There's no reason why he should be touching her at all. So now what do I do? And I really needed, for Kim to get to that place where she starts to question whether or not her own penance and dealing with her own guilt is as important as her child's safety. So I'm really sorry that I remember you saying your heart was in your throat. I apologize for stressing people out with this book. I've gotten a lot of notes about people being really worried while they're reading, and I think everyone's okay with how the book ends, but I am sorry that I'm causing some people some sleepless nights.